On this week's episode, we take a look at the new Helmsman USB focus controller, talk about how f-stops really work, and discuss crowdfunded filming with Koo from No Film School. DVTV starts right now.
This episode is made possible in part by CPM Camera Rigs, your lightweight solution for caging the beast. Rig Wheels, camera wheels for creativity. Small HD, the world's smallest high-definition monitors.
Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of DVTV. I'm your host, Tony Reale, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Lightcraft Workshop Helmsman USB follow focus system. Now this is a unique type of focus control system because it uses the USB on a Canon HDSLR. Now what makes it so unique is that it's not using a gear system, instead it interfaces directly to the USB protocol of the HDSLR Canon camera. Now if you watched our video where we showed you how to use your laptop or other computer as basically a free monitor, you'll notice that we also talked about how you could control several of the functions on your Canon HDSLR through the Canon EOS utility software. Now what this USB focus controller does is it bypasses the need for a computer and that software, and it goes straight to the USB protocol built into the camera. This allows you to control most of the functions of the camera, including your f-stop, your focus, your start and stop, live view mode, all sorts of different things that you can control just through the different buttons on there. And the way that the controller is set up is if you press one button in a certain mode, it does one thing. If you long press it, it does another thing. If you're in a different mode, it does another thing. So there's a little manual that comes with it. I recommend keeping that manual very close because there's going to be lots of times you're going to want to know what does what in each mode. But the main thing that you're buying this for is the ability to use it as a focus control system. And the way that works is you basically use your focus gear and you select the speed that you want it to run. Now, the way that Canon HDSLRs are set up and the lenses, there's three main focus speeds that you can choose. You have your slow, which is painstakingly slow, incredibly slow. I consider it probably not very useful because of just how slow it is. There's medium, which is probably something you're going to use most of the time. But if you do want to do a whip focus, you're going to want to use the fast speed for that. Now the issue that we run into is that the USB protocol of the Canon HDSLRs only allow you to go in steps. There isn't a smooth linear focus, instead it's focus steps. That's why there's a slow, medium, and fast. It depends on how big those focus steps are when you turn the focus dial. Now this isn't a limitation of the USB controller, this is a limitation that's built into the software of the Canon camera. And so of course the USB controller can only go at those different speeds. You'll notice in this fast speed that you get stepping, and this is not very appealing because you traditionally want to have a nice smooth linear focus. Now if you do a whip focus, you can kind of smooth that out, but it's going to be really difficult to try and do that because at the fastest speed, just a little turn of the dial is going to mean a very large difference. Now besides the traditional focus ring for controlling your focus, there's also the buttons that have different functionality. The first buttons that you can choose from are just basically ones that make the focus go back and forth, either all the way to the end or all the way back. It's just a single use for those. Now the ones that you're probably going to use more often are the focus presets. And this is a really nice feature that makes the USB focus controller actually come in quite handy. Now what you can do is, first of all, you can set your in and out points. And this is very simple. You just turn your focus knob to where you want it to be an end marker. You turn it all the way back to where you want to start. You set your in and out points, and you simply just push one button, and it does the focus pull depending on what speed that you have it set at, and then you push the other button, and it does a focus pull back. This is very handy. You can do repeatable focus pulls all at the same time, all at the same speed, so that can be very handy. Now the other one is focus stops, and this would be like if you had a follow focus that had hard stops on it, that it could only turn it so far. Just as you did before, you would set your in and out points, but what happens is as you turn it on the focus knob, it'll stop at when it hits that point, even if you keep turning it the same direction. Same as it goes backwards. So this is nice if you want to control the speed yourself, but you want to have that mark so that you don't have to worry about going too far on a whip focus or something like that. With the release of tons of affordable motion control systems out there, it's really nice to be able to easily do repeatable camera moves that in the past would only have been able to be done through major Hollywood, hugely expensive gear. And with using a tool like this, the USB follow focus, you can repeatedly do controlled focus pulls, and you could use them in conjunction with something like that, that again would normally cost lots of money for major Hollywood gear. Now, I would not label this as a replacement for a standard follow focus. There are times where you're going to want to have the organic feel and just the familiarity from a true focus pull of a focus gear. But if you are able, this is a tool that can really help you in your kit and allow you to do things that you normally could not do from a standard follow focus.
This episode is made possible in part by Manhattan LCD, the affordable solution for high-definition monitoring. CheesyCam.com, the latest gear reviews and DIY video and photo projects. JAG35, affordable solutions for filmmakers.
A friend of mine once told me a joke. He asked me, what is the difference between an f-stop and a bus stop? I said, well, what's the difference? And he says, well, if you don't know, you shouldn't be a photographer. Now, as not funny as that joke is, the truth is a lot of photographers and videographers don't truly know what an f-stop is. They know that if they crank it up, it gets darker, and if they crank it down, it gets brighter, and if they crank it down, you get shallower depth of field, you crank it up, you get wider depth of field. But what is that actually doing? So let's talk a little bit about what an f-stop is and how you can use that knowledge to improve your video and photography. So stops can actually mean different things depending on what you're associating them with. If you're using an ND filter or ND gel, you're effectively bringing the intensity of the light down to 50% of what it was before, and that'd be considered one stop down. Now, what happens with a lens is you're using fractional stops. That's what the f-stop stands for. And the fraction of that, the math is a little confusing, but it's basically the square root of 2. And the way that works is you actually end up with 1.414 is the square root of 2. But if you do the math, each f-stop is a single power of the square root of 2. So basically, if you had the equation, it would be f1 is your starting point, then f1.4 is the square root of 2 to the power of 1. And then the next f-stop is the square root of 2 to the power of 2, which would be f2. And then the power of 3 would be f2.8. If you do the math, it continues on f4, f5.6, and so on. And these are, each point you hit those marks is one stop down of what you were before. So you're reducing the light intensity. Now, the reason that this is important is when you factor in the law of reciprocity. Now, I'm getting all fancy here, but basically what this means is when you drop one thing down, you have to bring something up to keep the same light intensity. For example, if you are shooting at 1/100th of a second shutter speed, and you are shooting at f2.8. Now, if you drop your shutter or your aperture down to f4, now you have to bring your shutter speed up to 1/50th of a second to have the exact same exposure. So this is the law of reciprocity, where when one thing happens, the other thing has to be in conjunction. Now, there's really three things that you use to control your exposure when you're shooting with HDSLRs, and that is your f-stop, your shutter speed, and your ISO. Now, when you're shooting video, traditionally you want to use the 180-degree shutter rule, which basically means that when you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you should be shooting at 1/60th of a second shutter speed. If you're shooting at 60 frames per second, you should use 120th of a second shutter speed. This is just because that creates the proper amount of motion blur that we're used to in cinema and everyday life for that matter. If you shoot at higher shutter speeds, you'll get a more of a staccato action-y feel. And this is okay. You can use that in movies when you want to have an intense action feel. But if you don't want an intense moment, that's where you should be using that traditional shutter speed. So if you have a locked-in shutter, how can you change the other options? Well, you can change your ISO in conjunction, or you can change your f-stop, or you can use ND filters like we talked about earlier. For example, if you're going to be shooting at f2.8 and you realize that your proper exposure should be actually at f5.6, that's 2 stops down. So you're going to want to use a filter at roughly about 2 stops that can bring your light intensity down to get the proper exposure. So all this used together, you can get proper exposure and you can understand how to set your camera properly.
This episode is made possible in part by Lightcraft Workshop, the perfect tools to create the perfect image. Rode microphones.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm here now with Ku from No Film School, and through the miracle of technology, we can actually be talking as if we were in the same room together. Ku's in New York, I'm here in Green Bay. And anyways, Ku, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are obviously the creator of No Film School, which is a really popular blog for indie filmmakers, small-time video producers, stuff like that. Why don't you give us a little background of how that started and what was your passion behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. No Film School is named as such because I really think you can learn a lot online. I'm sure Next Wave DV fits into the same category of websites that you can just go and visit and read, and over the days and weeks and months, you pick up a lot. So it's not necessarily, I'm not saying that you don't need to go to film school, but I try and share everything I learned there, and hopefully people can learn a lot by following the website.
Now for you, you have obviously been pursuing creating your own feature film for a long time, and No Film School has kind of been your journey through that. And now we're kind of coming up to that culmination point. You're right now launched your own Kickstarter campaign to create your feature film. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So previously I'd done a web series, I'd done some shorts, had them in festivals, and really spent a long time building up to this point, and I finally have written my first feature. Well, it's not the first feature I've written, but it's the first feature that I'm going to make. And it's called Man-Child, and it's about youth basketball. So I'm talking about 13-year-old basketball players as opposed to the college and the pro athletes you typically see in the movies. The reason I was interested in this topic is because the kids are getting recruited so young now that the experience of being nationally ranked when you're 12 years old, I think is really interesting dramatically. And so I wrote the script, and I was fortunate enough to get selected into a couple of screenwriting programs here in New York, and now I'm trying to crowdfund the production of the feature using Kickstarter.
Now there are probably a lot of people out there that have been considering using things like Kickstarter to fund their own project. Tell us about your experiences so far.
It's been amazing so far. I launched the campaign on August 16th, and it's running until September 23rd. And so, Kickstarter is where you ask a large audience for a small amount of money each, as opposed to vice versa. And on Kickstarter, if you don't make your goal, then you get nothing. And because Man-Child is a sports film, unfortunately, there's no way to really make a sports film with lots of cast members and lots of locations and lots of carefully rehearsed action for cheap. So the goal for the Man-Child campaign is $115,000, which is ambitious for a Kickstarter campaign. Of course, as far as a feature film goes, that's very little. But it's been it's been a 24-hour-a-day effort on my part, and thankfully the No Film School community has really gotten behind it, and we're past the midpoint of the campaign now, and I'm not sure if we're going to make it, but we've certainly come a long ways. And for anyone who's watching who wants to check out the campaign, an easy way to find it is to go to koo.co/manchild. That's koo.co/manchild.
Now, from your experiences, what can you recommend for people? Do you think that Kickstarter or other crowdfunded options are going to be some of the future of funding films like this?
Well, I think there's some interesting questions with that. First of all, somebody like me who's a relative unknown to run a Kickstarter campaign is one thing. I think one of the questions about the future of crowdfunding is what happens when, say, a Quentin Tarantino gets on there. Tarantino may say, hey, this movie that I want to make is too edgy even for the studios, and he could go directly to his fans and say, pre-buy the movie for $25 and get it funded that way. Potentially, that could be a $1 million Kickstarter campaign. So I think we're at the very beginning of what is possible in terms of crowdfunding, but I also think that the limitations in the U.S. on crowdfunding are such that you're not allowed to give investment potential to people. You're only allowed to give rewards. So, for example, on Manchild, I can, for $10, if you pledge the project for $10, you get the entire film when it's done. And something I'm doing to try and go beyond just the product that you would normally get when the film is finished is that backers, because $115,000 is actually the same amount as the number of frames in the feature film, roughly. So 24 frames a second, 60 seconds a minute, 80 minutes or so. That's 115,000 frames. So the backers are going to get to see the unique part of the movie that they made possible. And no one else in the world gets that. And that's something that you get for getting on board early. I thought that was a unique way of rewarding people for helping me to make the movie. But going forward in crowdfunding, the Securities Exchange Commission has a law against letting people invest for potential profit if they're not qualified and across state lines and all these kinds of laws. And those things are going to have to change if it's really going to go to the next level, I think.
Now, obviously, a big part of getting this crowdfunding is getting the name out there, getting your name out there, getting people aware of it. What have been some of your basic marketing strategies that have helped you to just get your name out there?
The first thing is just, I've built an audience over the last year and a half at No Film School. And so that, I wouldn't dare to try to run this sizable campaign if I didn't feel that, I had an audience online already. And that is the reason it's been a success so far. I think a lot of crowdfunding campaigns amount to reaching out to family and old friends and really, not guilt-tripping people into giving you money, but certainly reaching out, and they know you personally, and so they feel they're invested in you, and they want to help you achieve your dream, whatever that dream is. On my campaign, it's been really supported by the independent film community, and certainly building up your audience online is part of being a filmmaker or writer or any sort of creative in the age of the internet.
And now, how has social media or any of the new technologies of the current day been able to help you in that as well?
Social media is great. Something I posted on my website about the campaign, though, is and as you run Next Wave DV, if you run a website, you're used to being able to see where people are coming from. The thing about running a Kickstarter campaign that I've found is that you don't get those kind of metrics. So in terms of, are the backers coming from my website? Are they coming from Twitter? Are they coming from Facebook? I honestly can't say. And so that's been sort of one of the interesting parts of the process has been to be in the dark in terms of what's effective and what's not. There are some ways I've thought of that, in retrospect, I could have maybe gotten some metrics that way, but Kickstarter doesn't give you those things. And so you really just have to get out there in social media in every way you can and just hope that someone likes the project and shows up and helps you make it.
Now, Ku, assuming that you are able to get the funding for this film and everything gets started, what are going to be some of the first steps that are necessary for starting off your film?
Yeah, the first thing I want to do is get a producer on board. The stuff I've done to date has been very guerrilla. It's been no budget, and working with unpaid actors on nights and weekends, and just having to order pizza and that being the budget is very, very different from scheduling out an entire feature and dealing with tax credits and insurance and permits and all those kinds of things. So to date, I've been a one-man band. I've shot, I've edited, I've done everything myself. And certainly on a feature film, it's a much larger project. So going forward, it's going to be about getting the right people on the project, and I hope to leverage the same independent film community that's backing the project, and to be able to look in that community to find the right people and bring this dream to hopefully reality if the campaign is successful, which is a big if.
Now, obviously, you're working with a kind of a medium level indie film budget. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility potentially in what kind of camera gear you might be using. What are some of those decisions that you've been going through, like potentially what camera you're going to be using, what kind of lighting, what kind of other equipment?
Absolutely. I've been asked a lot if I'm going to use a DSLR to shoot the feature. it's certainly a great story. All of the movies that are being made on DSLRs out there for low cost and then getting picked up and distributed. It's a wonderful time for these cameras. And I wrote the DSLR cinematography guide, so I really feel strongly about them. But because this is a basketball film, it has a lot of fast action. So the jello cam that you're used to seeing in DSLRs might prevent me from being able to use a DSLR in the future. And there's also some slow motion sequences. So I doubt this is going to be a movie that I'm going to shoot on something that I actually own. You know, it's going to be trying to find the best rate for a rental. And if we were to shoot it tomorrow, which we're not, so you know, this answer may change. But if we were to shoot it tomorrow, it would probably be on a RED camera, simply for the slow motion, and you know, because the CMOS refresh rate is much faster, so you're able to do more fast camera moves.
Now, Ku, with only a little over a week left in your campaign, what are some of the things that you're going to be doing for that last push?
You know, it's been a really interesting thing to run this campaign. I think as independent filmmakers, we're used to just trying to get things done and not asking for things. And so it's been difficult for me to go out there and, you know, just really be asking for help all the time for, you know, over a month straight. And of course, as a filmmaker, you want to make your movie however you can. And so, you know, that's been the lesson that I think I've learned throughout this. It's just, you know, however you can make your movie, you're going to do that. And over the next week, you know, Independent Film Week is actually coming up here in New York. My script is there as part of this IFP program, so I'm going to be talking to a number of producers, and it's probably going to be the craziest week of my life. So the big challenge at the end is going to be how to be online and offline at the same time, you know. So I think as someone who runs a website, you understand these things, and hopefully as soon as this interview is over, I'm going to go think of a lot of ways to get some new content out there and you know, just really try and make a big push at the end, because as I said, if you don't get there, then you get nothing and it all goes back to zero. So I think any filmmaker knows that you're going to do what's necessary to make your movie, and that's what the last week will be about.
Well, Ku, thanks for your time and best of luck on your film. And guys, definitely check out Ku's website at nofilmschool.com. There's tons of great resources on there. And if you have the chance, donate to his film as well, Man-Child. With your help, he can make this film a reality.
Want more Next Wave DV in your life? Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube to be notified when the next episode airs. Visit our website for daily posts on the latest digital video news. Like us on Facebook to join the Next Wave DV community. And follow us on Twitter for behind-the-scenes news and pictures.